My name is Harold Lambert. I do crop consulting about 50 miles northwest of here, and the conference had contacted me a while back to ask me if I would present some information on red-banded stinkbugs. Apparently, they were aware that we have some in south central Louisiana, and we have for about the last 10 or 12 years. So I'm going to try to run through this fairly quick, and hopefully have some time left over for questions or discussion. The first thing I wanted to stress is that for red-banded stink bugs, it doesn't apply to a lot of y'all. We've got some consultants in here, but for the growers or anybody that's trying to keep track of this on their own, you're going to have to do some homework on making sure that you can identify this species of stink bugs and contrast that, distinguish it from the other species of stink bugs that are out there also. When you get out in the field, if you need training on this, find somebody who can come in and get you in the field so that you can learn how to identify if you have to do battle with red-banded stink bugs. As I'll mention again in a few minutes, you're going to start spending a lot more time in the field if you're going to do it right. This is what has happened to people with red-banded stink bugs when they didn't do it right. The guy from the Allstate commercial showed up in their bean fields, and he caused a lot of mayhem. And people said, look, we're not going to do that anymore. But that is how people felt when they kind of got bushwhacked or surprised by what red bandits can do. Obviously, I would say first thing you need to do is hire a good, qualified, experienced entomologist who's got some track record with managing these stink bugs, because they are different from the other stink bugs that we have out there. The identification, as I said, is key to it, because that helps you know more about the timing of your sprays and what choice of product that you want to use. The sampling method is a big deal to me. I'm very biased toward the use of the sweet net. If you don't have a sweet net, you might think about getting one and learning how to use it. A shake cloth, I don't think you're going to be pleased with, depending on the canopy and the structure of the crop. Red-banded stink bugs don't shake well. Okay, you bend a tall crop over and you're whacking them like that down toward the lower third of the main stem where there might be some pods. You're not getting enough banging and shaking right there, and you're going to count them. The stink bugs are still on the plant, so there's a lot of error here, or potential error, so you want trustworthy counts, and a lot of that depends on canopy height and all that. In Louisiana, on our late 4s and 5s, that canopy can get like up to my chin. Then later in the season, this crop falls over, it leans over because we've had weather and thunderstorms, and you can't even hardly walk through the beans, much less get a sample. And so sweet net's not going to work, shake cloth's not going to work. What do? Well, you're going to have to do the best you can. You're going to do a lot of walking and a lot of looking. You're going to bend those plants over and you're going to bang them with your sweet net and just look on the ground. You can't get a shake cloth underneath the canopy. It's a nightmare, and it's really something more suited for somebody about half my age, but that's another story. Alternate host for this insect is pretty much clover. I mean, they're pretty serious on clover in the spring. Steve may touch on this in a little while, but in the month of May, when it starts getting really hot and really dry, the environment's going to drive them off of that clover, and they're going to go find some soybeans. As far as I know, that's their preferred host, and that's the available host. I walk a lot of cornfields. I've never seen a red-banded stink bug in a cornfield. They do not go to that crop. Southern green stink bug comes off of clover and does go to cornfields because they love that microclimate in a cornfield during your shoot formation. They like that. Red bandits apparently don't care. They're going to a soybean field. The dividends from spending more time in the field is definitely something, because you're going to have to take more samples, get more counts, and you're going to have to learn to keep track of those counts and from week to week, because the counts from last week and the week before that for all of our stink bugs is important. It's especially important, I think, for red bandits. Everybody down here is growing is growing group 4s, and we do plant a lot of group 5s in this part of Louisiana, early group 5s. So this early migration into, say, group 4s, if you are in a cane area, obviously the pod development is pretty advanced by the time they begin showing up in these fields. So just as a generalization, we have a lot less trouble with them in group 4s, and it just depends on pod development, how that matches up with migration. Then with our 5s, as our earlier beans are maturing, you can get into what I call it snowballing, because as the earlier beans mature, these stink bugs, the adults, will snowball into the later beans because the older beans are just no longer an attractive food source. The threshold, so we got to make a decision on when to treat. I use 16 per 100, 4 per 25, and that depends a lot on what I feel is the migration trend, or what's the trend line on this species of stink bugs. Are we just starting to get into migration? Have they been in the field at a low level for a while? If I've got counts from previous weeks where they were, say, averaging about 8 per 100 or something like that, these thresholds at say a third or a half of a threshold from previous weeks, to me, are at least partially additive. So you can't just stay out there indefinitely with a half threshold of stink bugs. They're causing damage, so you have to take that into account. I'll use, in some situations where there's been this migration is ongoing, start thinking about making a recommendation report at about 12 per 100, because by the time the logistics of the spray operation take place, it's probably going to be at 16, because that's how these things operate. Don't wait. If you wait too long, you say, look, they're moving in, I'll just kill more stink bugs if I wait another week. Big mistake, because a lot of egg laying is going to have transpired, and you're building up your headaches in future weeks by waiting. That's what I've learned my lesson on that. There are other stink bugs out there as well, and I just wanted to mention that in this part of Louisiana, we do have one, the Euschistus quadrata, which we don't talk a lot about, but it's every bit as hard to kill, to me, as red-banded stink bugs. And in some cases, its numbers can contribute to significantly to our threshold. The reinfestation as the season goes on, you say, well, we've done a good job up to now, my counts look fine. You have to keep checking. Reinfestation is going to happen depending on the maturity of that field of soybeans. You have to keep checking them. Are you going to be applying a desiccant at maturity in that field? That's a big question that we learned in the last couple of years when it comes to what happens at the elevator, because, well, we do apply desiccant to just about all of our soybeans because it's been a moneymaker for us, and I'll talk more about that in a second. So what are we going to use? In Louisiana, we have, I guess it's a Section 18 or 24C?
24C.
24C, where we got an additional ½ pound of acephate. So we can go in a season with a maximum of 2 pounds AI. And I'm going to run through the scenario of 4 applications for red bandage, and you're thinking, there's no way I'm going to spend that kind of money on red banded stink bugs. If you don't like the cost of these applications, you're not for sure not going to like the cost of not spraying for them. I can guarantee you that, and a lot of people have learned this the hard way. So if I think if it's been a warm winter and the population potential is pretty high for red bandage, I may start off with an application. I'm going to save my acephate, and I'm going to use bifenthrin at the full rate plus an appropriate neonic, like a bifenthrin plus belay, or maybe, or just go ahead and use like an indigo, which is lambda-cyhalothrin and thiamethoxam. Or there's another product that's been used some, is one that's a jug mix of lambda-cyhalothrin and imidacloprid, and it's very inexpensive, and it's done a pretty good job in this situation. Otherwise, if you don't think it's going to be a really severe year, then just stay with this tank mix right here. Don't use a ½ pound or 3/4 of a pound by itself. and don't use that by itself. And you think, well, so-and-so used some other pyrethroid and he liked it. No, not gonna work down here. You wasted your money. This is it, okay? Then, so for a second application, it's always this guy right here, this tank mix. The choice of these products is important, but as I'll get to in a minute, how you apply them to me is even more important. The fourth or the third application, depending on where you're at, and 3 or 4 applications for us here, depending on the winter we had and what's going on in neighboring fields, it's pretty common, unfortunately. And we can co-apply other things if we need to. We may, sometimes maybe we have certain herbicide applications that need to go out, or a fungicide or something like that. But the key I wanted to mention is, with a desiccant, we get to that point in very late R6, R7, there's going to be variability in pod maturity. You're going to still have a lot of greenish pods out there. If you apply a desiccant and have countable numbers of red bandeds at threshold or something right around in that area, they're going to pummel you on those greener pods, and the grain elevator is going to let you know it in a few weeks. The pre-harvest interval on acephate is 15 days. 14 days. Pre-harvest interval on paraquat is I may have those reversed anyway.
No, it's 15.
It's 15. And so some people say, well, you could come in with a bifenthrin there. It's not going to work very well that late in the season anyway, plus it's a 25-day pre-harvest interval. So if you're going to stay legal, that's not going to work. So when you see where I'm coming from with either the third or fourth application, it kind of depends on what you had done earlier in the season. The application practices, to me, is something that you absolutely must not cut corners on, because even if you choose the right products and right combinations and you don't put them out right, you have let a lot of red-banded stink bugs survive. And I just think it's one of the most important things. By ground, we use at least a 20-gallon volume. Choose the proper nozzle so that you don't have these coarse droplets that eliminates the fine droplets that'll get down in the canopy. When we're talking about a canopy of soybeans that have some height and size to it, you've got to get the chemical down. These red-banded stink bugs feed deep in the canopy, and you've got to get the spray to them. So with a high boom height and 15 miles per hour forward speed and 10-gallon volume, you just wasted a bunch of time and money. I'm sorry. You just let too many stink bugs survive. This is not, to me, it's not negotiable. You got to, and a lot of guys have learned this the hard way. The airplane applications, again, it's even more of a challenge for a tall, dense canopy. Even on a modest canopy of beans, you've got to be in there at 5-gallon volume. I know a lot of pilots don't like to do that, but 8 or 10 is even better when you seriously have to kill these insects. The swath width, I'm not an airplane guy, and I hesitate to comment on this, but I have one aerial applicator on a large farm. This farm has its own full-size air tractor. They do a lot of rice, so his spray width is already, his boom configuration is already set for about 68 feet, okay? I know a lot of other planes are set for a wider swath. This pilot kills red-banded stink bugs way better than anybody else. I mean, it's over when he treats this field. The additives, I don't have any data on this, but I feel confident that they're helping at least some. We always put a methylated seed oil at a pint to the acre when we spray by ground, and an MSO at 1% when we spray by air. And you can't always be spraying. Some sprays have to happen in the hot part of the day. I think some of that helps. I think it might be helping the penetration in the canopy, but that's it. That's the only thing we put in there with it in terms of that adjuvant. What other insects are we controlling? You're definitely not going to get any soybean looper control. The bowworms, no. I guess if they just hatched and you got enough of a bifenthrin acephate solid droplet on them, you might kill a few of them, who knows. But on everything else, this tank mix is pretty good. For certain, all of our other stink bugs in the complex, you're going to do quite well on control with these tank mixes. So as far as the outcomes, I just want to stress that there's not a lot of room for error. These stink bugs are different. They cause a different kind of damage. They feed on the beans later in maturity. Not only do they remove moisture and cause that type of feeding damage, but they're withdrawing dry matter from that seed to a greater degree than most of our other stink bugs. And that's why the threshold, part of the reason why the threshold for this species is lower than our other ones. What happens at the elevator? What we have found, again, no hard data, but if your sample comes into the elevator and there's stink bugs crawling out of the pan, what do you think is going to happen in the mind of that person that's grading that sample? It's just psychology. So we use this desiccation sample to prevent excessive damage on those late pods, but also we don't want the grain grader at the elevator to be struggling with the visual aspect of stink bugs in that sample. So I don't know how much time I took, but perfect. Cool.